really excited to, be a part of this session, and we are really happy to welcome you to the international seminar, Shifting Paradigms. And particularly, I want to welcome National President. First of all, before I move to the formal welcome to all, I'm sorry I'm jumping, but welcome to our speaker, Mr. Keith Antoine. Thank you, Keith. We really, really honored to have you on, and everybody's looking forward to hearing from you. So, and we're excited to hear from you. I would also, look forward to the session and the interaction with the participants here. So, a formal welcome to the National President, Office Bearers, President Emeritus, past presidents, NC members, director, and office staff, diploma students, ISTD members, Mr. Ajay Phillips, Director, Dominion Phillips, partners and associates of Dominion Phillips Consultancy, and last but not the least, all our wonderful participants who are here with us. Without you, it was totally impossible. And we're really glad we have such a diverse audience. I'm your host for the next few hours, maybe 90 minutes, and I'm really, really glad to be here. The idea of this particular webinar, international webinar, we are collaborating with ISTD Western Region and Dominion Phillips Nagpur. It's about shifting paradigms. The thought came to our mind is that keeping the present situation in mind and the great need to stay motivated and drive motivation within organizations. Motivation is what makes people do what they do, and I think at any given point of time that keeps us going, and that's what we are going to hear it from the expert himself. I will be giving an introduction, so you will get to know Mr. Keith a little bit more. But for now, I would hand over to Mr. Korean Daniel, who is Regional Vice President of ISTD Western Region. And he will tell us a little bit about ISTD, that's Indian Society of Training and Development. Yes.
Thank you, Rowena. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Since the people are from all the world, everybody is in different timing.
Well said.
Friends, we are hosting this second webinar of Western Region. And I appreciate Rowena and Ajay for offering their facility and their speaker, Mr. Keith, for this webinar. As you know, this particular timing, which we are observing this distancing and all other government regulations because of this COVID-19. And on the contrary, this all challenges we are making as opportunities. Today, even ISTD themselves conducting more than 100 seminars in a month, including all the chapters and all. So what we are doing is we are trying to develop our time to learn more. And when we talk about the world situation, most of the renowned universities also offering their courses free during this time. Even most of the online libraries are giving their registration free. So there are innumerable opportunities for learning. So people are using it, especially ISTD also taken up that challenge to offer various webinars to our people. So further also we will be conducting main seminars. And when I talk about ISTD has been established since April 1970. This is the 50th year, our golden jubilee year for us. And we are offering 50% discount or individual life membership. That is by simply paying 4,779 rupees, including GST, you can become a life member of such a great organization. And this particular offer is extended up to June 30th because of this COVID situation. Friends, we are not only training and development organization, we are also empaneled in various corporates as well as PSUs for conducting their annual training sessions. We also have a diploma program, which is 18 months program. It will be an online program, and it is conducted through our head office, but channelized through all the chapters. As I said, the ISTD is a membership-based organization. As on today, we are having around 6,000 members all over India, and we are also planning to develop it to a international where we have already started giving membership to the Bangladesh and other places. So the chances are there that learning facility can be enlarged with a vast places as well as situation, and this particular arrangement of webinars will enhance the situations. I once again thank Dominio Consultancy to be in touch with us and assure us to get this webinar done. So I thank our national president, our director, especially Mr. Gurvinder, to allow us to host this seminar. And I wish all of you a happy learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will not take more time, but it was important to share some things about ISTD. I'll just quickly run you through about Dominion Phillips. In fact, me, myself, and firstly, I'm Rowenaphillips. I'm consulting psychologist and director, Dominion Phillips, and a co-director founder with Mr. Ajay Phillips, who is the director of Dominion Phillips Consultancy. I'm glad to share with you that the two of us are lifetime members with ISTD, and it is so amazing to be a part of this valuable organization that believes and drives learning and a nation at large. And at Dominion Phillips Consultancy, we are a learning and development organization. We believe that if you want to leave a legacy, invest in people. This is the core vision that drives Dominion Phillips Consultancy. Our vision and passion over the decades has evolved into a business enterprise with, like I mentioned, Mr. Ajay Phillips as founder director and myself as co-founder director. We are in a mission of transforming people through developmental process and empowering them to manage complex human behaviors in a day-to-day living, which is the need of the hour. We at Dominion Phillips emphasize and focus at learning and development and human resource as an untapped potential. Since 2014, we have trained and certified hundreds of participants with a life transforming experience, which includes psychologists, doctors, physiotherapists, entrepreneurs, senior managers, engineering and management faculty students. With a wealth of more than 20 years of experience in academics, human resource, operations, sales, learning and development, and psychological consulting to more than 10,000 individuals, we offer the best of us to all our clients and individuals. Our workshops are highly effective in personal transformation, behavioral change, performance management, healing, and wellness. We use scientific methodology of neurolinguistic programming, cognitive psychology, behavioral science, human potential movement, and principles of management. Therefore, we believe, Dominion Phillips Consultancy believes in synergy and collaboration with leaders and organization to build people and nation at large. It's indeed our privilege today to collaborate with ISTD Western region, and we are grateful to the national office to giving us this opportunity, and with leaders and renowned speakers like of Mr. Keith Antoine. We are really privileged and honored to collaborate, and we really look forward to creating a bigger impact. So participants can keep putting in their comments and keep staying engaged. We are quickly moving on to our session with Mr. Keith. I know that you're waiting eagerly to hear. So let me start with a really brief introduction of Keith. I know his profile is really vast, but we've tried to put in a few words to give you an understanding of his background. Welcome, Mr. Keith Anton, and we have the pleasure of having you. Mr. Keith Anton is a performance coach with corporate and sporting experience. He comes with a background in IT and project management for UK and multinational organizations, together with 3 decades of coaching elite, track, and field athletes in a rare combination. As a performance coach, Keith has worked globally with organizations from all sectors. He coaches individuals and teams to achieve their chosen outcomes, and his current focus is on developing leaders' critical skill of holding effective performance conversations. Over the years, he has blended his sporting and business knowledge and experience to create a unique program which increases the confidence and competence of leaders in this area. Keith uses his coaching skills to deliver practical, relevant, and thought-provoking keynote presentations. Keith, with a background of IT, has enjoyed long athletics coaching career covering multiple Olympic, Paralympics, World and European Championships. In the 80s and 90s, he was Midland Sprints, hurdles relays coach and Great Britain coach for sprints and relay events. He has personally coached many international athletes, some to world and Olympic standard, including Helen Frost, Catherine Merry, Darren Campbell. From 2006, Keith was Great Britain disability sprints coach through the Sydney and Athens Paralympics, returning for the London 2012 Paralympics, where his 3 athletes won 1 gold and 2 silver medals, with all personal best performances. The gold rush continued into Rio 2016 Paralympics with Richard Whitehead and the London 2017 Para-Athletics World Championship with Richard and Marlo Van Ryn. He is currently working with Richard through to the Tokyo 2020. Let me tell you that Keith has a very extensive travel schedule, and some good things happen at this time is that we have him here. Else he was preparing for the Tokyo. So we still have him here to hear from him. Now creating the same reputation as a coach in business, author of Working in 90 Minutes, Keith's practical approach to is engaging and interactive, challenging and fun. As a performance coach, improving performance is what Keith does best. And I'm sure you have a glimpse of the kind of work he does, and you're excited to hear him out. And if you are excited, I want you to type EXTD in your message box so I can have him start to talk. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There you go. So over to you, Keith. Everybody is excited, and that's what you do best, get people thinking and drive them to stay inspired and motivated. So over to you. We welcome you once again, and we really look forward to this next 45 minutes. Please stay till the end. To all the participants, I'm requesting once again, please stay till the end because you have a surprise and you will get a chance to ask Keith some question and answer. Yes, Keith, welcome. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rowena and Dr. Kurian. It is a pleasure to be with you all. So many people on this call. I'm just not sure whether we are breaking any rules by having that many people excited on a Monday afternoon. We'll have to check on that to see whether we are allowed to do that. But look, there are so many of you out there. It's great to have you all on. Unfortunately, I can't see you. So from time to time, just to check you're not asleep, I will ask you to type some things and send me a little message just to help me to understand that we are making sense and you are still with me. So really what I want to do is look at a few topics that I think is useful for us to think about, particularly in these challenging times that we're in, and maybe give you a few things that you can think differently about. So we will touch on some things like helping people to, how do we achieve change in others, look at development, look at goal setting, motivation, and feedback. And throughout all of that, there will be an emphasis on just how do we help to generate thought in others, because for me, this is the key 21st century skill that anybody who is interacting with people, be they leaders, parents, teachers, it doesn't matter. If interacting with people is important to you, then the ability to generate thought is going to be a key skill. So I do want to make sure that I leave some time for you to ask some questions. So I will give if you like, a sort of general start. And oh, I see someone asking the question of how do we generate thought in others? We will come to that. So what I want to do then is give a general flavor from my perspective, but equally I appreciate we've got people from all over the world. So I want to give time for you to ask some questions, and then we can make it very specific to you as well. So I'll start from the general and you help me to bring it to specific. And so to make sure that I don't run out of time, I'm going to get on with it straight away. So this is where, excuse me, I'm going to put these glasses on because I'm going to need to play with the technology for a little bit now and attempt to share my screen with you. So, okay, all right, got it. Okay, so how do we try to achieve change, especially when we're looking at other people? So the question I have for you is this, and just for in your own heads, you don't have to type anything just now, but has there ever been a time, or think of a time, when you have had an interaction, someone is doing something, acting in a way that you don't really like, and you would like to have to try and change that? Okay, so you want to try and influence or get change in what somebody else is doing. And if you can ever, if you've had that experience, and I'm sure we all have, then just bring that to mind and keep that in your head as we go through this next piece. So I'm actually going to put something up on the screen, and even though I'm sharing my screen, I hope I'll be able to see your replies. So there's a little statement there. People always do the right thing. I wonder how many people agree with that? Just as it stands. I know it's a very broad statement, but if you agree with that, just type a yes, and if you don't, type a no. I'm just looking to see what's coming up. I can't actually see what. Oh, there you go. I can see some raised hands. All right, well, let me move on. See, most people, just that statement on its own, most people would not agree. People don't always do the right thing. But that's only half of it. So let me give the other half. And so this is, people always do the right thing as they see it at that point in time for them. And for me, now, this I do believe. Now, let's not confuse the word right with correct or moral or whatever, but this is from their perspective. This is in their heads. And even if we look at some of the terrible things that take place around the world, this still is true. People may understand on one level that it might not be a nice thing to do, but the fact that they do it means that in that moment, it makes sense to them. So in their heads, then, it is the right thing to do. So whether it's a big thing, a small thing, so it could be huge, it could be something as simple as those of you that have the little people in the house with you who may be not keen on keeping their bedrooms tidy, who knows? It can be anything. But how do we try then and effect change? And really, we can work above the line or we can work below the line. And let me just quickly run through what I mean by that. The easiest way, especially if we have authority, when things are not as we would like them to be, we just tell people what to do. Okay, we just say, don't do that, do it in a different way. So we can just tell them, and that can be very direct, it can be very harsh, but I'm sure most of you on the call are not very direct and harsh people. I've not met you, but I'm sure you're all really, really nice. And nice people don't always like to be very directive. So they will sometimes advise people. And giving advice is a very reasonable thing to do. Sometimes they will make suggestions. It's also a very reasonable thing to do. And sometimes they will even ask people. They will ask questions. However, these questions are really still telling. And these questions sound like, maybe, have you thought about doing it like this? Or wouldn't it be a good idea if? So the point I'm making here is these are all coming from our heads. We're telling, we're advising, we're suggesting. Even when we often ask questions, we're doing it from our perspective and hoping that that will cause the other person to change. And I've got to say, most of the time, it doesn't. Let me just use a completely random example here, or different examples, so I'm not random. Think about driving. I'm sure a lot of you will drive. And imagine you are driving on the road, and it's not a very busy road, and there's not a lot of traffic. If you're driving along and you're taking in the view, and up ahead, maybe there's a bridge or there's a piece on the side of the road, you spot a police car. I wonder, what is the first thing that you will do? I'm actually just going to come out of share. So maybe if you just type, what do you think? Okay, check your speed. I'm with you. Yeah, I think a lot of people will be doing that. What else? Also some reducing speed. Okay, some slowing down. Okay, that's good. All right, so a lot of people are talking about the speed there and the seatbelt. I'm seeing seatbelt as well. So here's the thing. Think about it. In that moment when you spot the police car, where is your focus? And actually, what it does is the focus will go to the speedometer, or the focus will go to making sure the seatbelt is on, or on whatever rules you're worried about breaking. The interesting thing is the focus is no longer on driving. The focus is no longer on the road and the other road users. So we need to be aware. So let me just try and share my screen back again. So what we need to be aware of is when there is a large tell, if the tell is big enough to get our attention, then what we try and do is we comply. It demands compliance. And what we need to appreciate is compliance takes the focus away from performance. So if we're trying to help people to do the best that they can do, I'm not saying that telling, advising, suggesting, or asking those questions are wrong, but we need to appreciate that they can get in the way. So I wonder, and I won't ask you to type anything here, imagine, let's just focus on speed. So let's say we're speeding and we see the police car and we slow down. Then we pass the car and the car decides it's not interested in us, it's not chasing us. I wonder what we do. And the vast majority of us, we will just speed up again. So I wonder why we speed up. Well, here's the thing. Nothing below that line that you can see there has changed. We don't see anything any differently. If we believe we're good to drive 10 or 15 miles an hour above the speed limit, that's what we do. Police car will momentarily slow us down and we will comply. But if you take that away, we go back to doing what we have always done. So when we rely on telling, advising, suggesting, it locks us in to that situation. It locks us into that position because as soon as we go away, the other person reverts to what they were doing anyway, because that's how they see it. So let me just come away from it. So imagine this. If you think of a time when maybe you've passed an accident on the road, and it's a bad accident, the sort of accident where you can't even tell what make of car it is. I wonder what happens to your driving for the next period. Because most people will then slow down a little bit. Most people will drive more carefully. Most people will make sure their seatbelt is on. Why? Because the accident has made you think. And because you think, it gives you the choice to see, well, thinking gives you the opportunity to see things differently. And at the point that you see things differently, you are then in a position to make a different choice. Until you see it differently, the choices will always be the same. And that's why people always go back to doing what they have always done. And the quickest and most effective way to generate thought in people is with questions. So the difference between above the line and below the line is really where the intent and where the focus is coming from. Above the line, we are working out of our heads. We are transmitting, we are telling, we are advising, we are suggesting. And because it's externally driven to the other person, just because we think we are transmitting clearly does not mean that that's what they're receiving. So sometimes it just confuses. It doesn't help people. However, if we can get them to think, and so it's internally driven, we strengthen their thought processes, enabling them to be in a position to make better choices, different choices, to see the world in a different way. And what that does is it changes the viewpoint for people. And once that view is changed, it's then really difficult for them to go back to what they were doing. So as I say, whether it's a situation at work, whether it's a situation at home, whether it's a situation socially, if it's not as you would like it to be, you can try telling, you can try suggesting, you can try advising. That's all okay. My experience is it doesn't really work and it doesn't last for long. When you stop telling, advising, suggesting, it all goes back. But if they see things differently and have a different perspective, then it is hard for them to go back to their old ways. So I hope that has made some sense. And so let me just now move on a little bit to development. And again, especially in these times where lots of things are happening remotely, I have a lot of questions from people asking about development and performance, and a lot come to me because they're interested in improving performance. A lot of organizations would like to have a culture of performance. And so my belief around this is that in order to have a performance culture, you have to have a development culture. But here's a challenge. Everybody believes that they have a development culture. Everybody believes they take development seriously. I'm sure most of you on the call will say that you take development seriously. In fact, if you do, you can type a yes, and if you don't, you can type a no. And let's just see. So I'm seeing some yeses coming through. It's a vary, but the majority are saying yes. So here's a little conversation I have with people about taking development seriously. So imagine, imagine that maybe today, if you're thinking of this in a work context, imagine that today is your last day in the job. Okay. So I wonder, and again, you don't have to type for this, just think this in your own head. I wonder how many of you know who would take over from you. And a lot of the time people do, but they do because of the structure of the organization, either the deputy or the number two, or there's an organizational chart which says when this person moves on, this person takes their place. And I have no issue with that. But if we don't even know or have an idea who might be taking over, then that suggests maybe development is not as high on the agenda as it should be. But I appreciate it. Things can be very fluid and nothing is sort of is set 100%. So let me take it on to the next level then, which is, imagine if I were to come and just follow you around and watch you doing what you do. for however long is appropriate. It might be days, it might be weeks, hopefully not months because I'm busy. So let's imagine that I'm following you around and watching what you do. Question for you to answer in your own head. What mark out of 10, if you were giving yourself a mark out of 10, where 10 is high and 1 is low, what mark out of 10 would you give yourself? Sorry, do that the way. What mark would you expect me to give you in terms of how well and how consistently you are working to make sure that whoever takes over from you is capable of doing the job that needs to be done? And for me, that is my entry level to, okay, I've seen someone saying a 6, someone saying a 9. I like that. So some good numbers, some good numbers. Okay, so that, if you like, is my entry level. Here comes what for me is the real development question. So very similar. Imagine I'm following you around and I'm observing what you do. What mark would I give you? What mark would you expect me to give you for how well, how consistently, how consciously you are working to make sure that whoever takes over from you does a significantly better job than the one you are doing now? And that, for a lot of people, is quite a challenge. To work in a way which means that the next person is better than you. A lot of managers that I come across find that a bit of a challenge. They find it a bit of a threat, because if everyone around them looks like they are going to be even better, then that challenges their position. But in order to really achieve performance and sustain performance, we actually have to make sure that the next incumbent, the next holder of the post, is better than we are. And if at each stage the next person takes it to a higher level, that's how we sustain performance. It's very easy to achieve a moment of performance, but a lot of organizations struggle to keep that performance going. And the only way is to have that mindset, to have that intention to make sure that the next person is better than we are. It's what I do as a coach. I actually work as a coach to almost make myself redundant. When my athletes, when the people that I'm working with no longer need me, that frees me up to go to another level. That frees me up to look at other things. Whereas the norm that I find is for people to want to be needed. We like being needed. When you look at the way the world is at the moment, we can't be with people, we can't help people out. We take away that ability to be needed, we often feel lost. And we work in the same way. We work in a way to be needed. Whereas actually, the paradigm we need to think about here is working in a way that we are not needed, that people can survive and thrive and flourish without us. And that enables us to be able to move on and take things to another level. Enable people to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So just in terms of mentioning goals, it just gives me the chance to now, I just want to talk a little bit about goals and goal setting. And as I do this, maybe you think of your goal. I don't know what the key thing is that you have as a target or an objective, either for this period or the year, but just think about your key goal and keep that in mind, and we will come back to that. Every organization that I come across, they set goals for people. It's nothing new, it's nothing unusual. But for me, I often find the process is incomplete. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, rather than maybe give a lengthy explanation, maybe I will just share a story with you and an event that took place for me back in 2012 at the Paralympics in London. And just before I do that, let me just explain a little bit about how it works. a lot of the time in the way our athletes are funded, it's very different to, the principle is different to how you get paid at work. Normally, we do some work and we get paid for the work. Funding in sport often works differently because the funding is for a future performance. And I think this is an idea that maybe some organizations might need to begin to look at. We're very used to paying for past performance, but when you fund for future performance, it changes the mindset. It changes the way people go about doing what they're doing. Because what we're doing now is investing in them for the future, not paying them for past efforts. So an athlete came to me in 2011, he had just won the World Championships, and this then meant he was on the top level of funding. So he's a current world champion, he's on the top level of funding, and in the next 12 months, he broke the world record. So going into the games in London, what do you think his primary goal was? So I don't know, if you want to just type a word or two, thinking about athletics, going into a competition, someone who is at the top of their game, currently at the top of the world, what do you think their primary objective is? And the first, there you go, be the winner and win the gold medal. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, my guess will be that a lot of the goals that you have will be exactly the same as that gold medal type goal. And it's a big goal, and big goals are great. They get us excited, they give us something to work towards. I have no problem with big goals. The challenge though, as I say, is I think if that's all we have, the process is incomplete. So let me take you back to 2012. I'm going to try and do the screen sharing again, so just bear with me. Okay, so just to get your take on, I wonder how you think the performance review might go with this guy. So because of his prosthetics, he tends to start slowly.
This time they're away, and Whitehead didn't get off to the best start.
So they're now halfway through.
Whitehead trying to make up ground there in lane 5 on the inside. Popoff and Chich are both going well, but it's the Australian Scott Reardon who's in the lead. It's Reardon against Shaquille Vance. Look at Whitehead coming with the run. Whitehead charges through. Whitehead wins the gold. In a new world record time.
So there you go, jumping back again. So I'm pleased to say that not only did he win, but he absolutely, he broke the world record in the process.
And he came so strong.
Pulse is racing. Good. I tell you what, my pulse was certainly racing partway through that race because the result did not always look like it was going to go that way. So I wonder, how do we review that performance? I mean, what would we say to him? And in the main, how that would go is, well done. Not only did you win, you also broke the world record. But here is what I needed to think about. The key question that I had to ask him was whether or not he was stopping now, having won, or whether he wanted to continue on to Rio. Because if we exist in a world where performance matters, if performance is important to us, then there's something really critical that we need to understand. And that is standing still is not an option. So if we exist in a world where performance matters, we have a choice, a really simple choice, and that is improve or retire. And as harsh as that may sound, that is the choice in a performance environment. Improve or retire. And when we think about a lot that is going on in the world at the moment, standing still relying on yesterday's results is just not going to work. The world, as we go forward, will look very different to the way the world looked yesterday. So the ability to just stand still and bask in former glories is just not happening. So if all that I've got to work with is congratulations, you won, how does that help me to help this guy to improve going towards Rio? Because the one thing that I was really certain about is that this performance, as good as it looked, would not win in Rio in 4 years' time. So the challenge is, if all we've got is the big goal, if all we've got is, I want the gold medal or I want to win, and we have the equivalent of that in work or in studies, it's not enough. Why isn't it enough? Because we don't have complete control over it. So for me, there are big goals and there are performance goals. And the difference between the big goal and the performance goal is we have complete control over the performance goal. So with this race, his goal, the goal that we were interested in, was not to win. In fact, there were 3 goals. I'll quickly tell you them. The first was to control the bend. We knew that he was going to be last, but just control the bend and do not chase. The second goal was to have a good transition off the bend into the straight. And the third goal was to hit top speed in the straight. Those were the things that I was looking for. And if he did all of those right, then we would get the result that we wanted. Now, without giving you a lot of detail, I could maybe give him 6 out of 10 for the first part, 7 out of 10 for the second part, and maybe 7 out of 10 for the third part. So in a way, it was an incomplete performance. And I wonder, do you think that made me a happy coach or an unhappy coach? Well, I'll tell you, I'm a happy coach in that moment, because if he can produce a result like that with an incomplete performance, then when we get the performance where we really want it to be, then the opposition will stand no chance. So my point to you is this: whatever your big goal might be, whatever your overall goal might be, what is your performance goal? Or what are your performance goals? These are the goals that sit below the big goal, that support the big goal, but that the goal is completely in your control. If it's not 100% in your control, it is not a performance goal. A lot of people had goals that were set for this year. With the current situation that we have with this pandemic, it has made it impossible for them to achieve those goals. Now, does that mean the goals were wrong? No, but if all that you have is the big goal that can be affected by outside influences or outside people, then it leaves the performer in a very vulnerable place. So as I say, it doesn't make the goal wrong, but it needs to be supported by true performance goals. And what makes the difference is those goals are in the control of the performer. So when we came into this year, Richard's goal was to compete in Tokyo in this year, in September. September the 4th is when he was due to compete. That's now moved to 2021. A lot of the things we were aiming to do this year we're still doing, but the overall goal has just shifted. Doesn't make it irrelevant, but because we had performance goals, we still achieve those, and it makes it very easy to adjust to a new big goal, which is to go to Tokyo in 2021 instead of 2020. So let me say, in order to keep people motivated and keep things moving well in times of change, the levels of motivation can be very difficult to sustain. And one of the things I often hear is people are very surprised, actually, when I tell them that I don't motivate people. That's not really what I do. And not because I don't think it's a good idea, not because I can't be bothered to do it, but I really don't think it's a good idea to motivate other people. I know that might sound strange, But let me explain this from an athletic point of view. It's easy to see why you would want an athlete to be motivated. Without the motivation, they will not perform. So if I am very crucial, if I am central to their motivation, if I am important for them to be motivated, then when they have a critical performance, the question is, where are they going to want me to be? And the obvious answer is with them, close at hand, so that I can help them and help them to be motivated for that performance. So following the logic, what is the likely impact on their performance if I cannot be there? So why would I work in a way that has me critical to their motivation, knowing that if I cannot be there at the critical moment, then their performance may go downhill? And as managers, as leaders, as parents, as teachers, do you always have the ability to be there when it matters? And obviously the answer is no. So I understand the need for motivation to be dealt with and to be, and as in a very, very important factor. All that I'm saying is, if we try to motivate others, if we are responsible for the motivation of others, then we create a dependence. And it's a dependence that will ultimately hurt their performance. So let's look at this maybe in a different way. And to do this, I need you to think of something. I need you to think of something that you have achieved, and you don't have to tell me about it. But I need you to think of something that you have achieved at some point in your life, and it could be work, it could be social, it could be family, it doesn't matter. However, it needs to be something that did not come to you easily. There was some challenge, there was some difficulty, there was some obstacle. However, you stayed with it and you got the result that you wanted. So I don't need to know what the situation was. But here's what I am interested in. And maybe if you can type in just literally 1 or 2 words, 2 or 3 words, maybe just there. What I'm interested in is this. When it got difficult, why did you not give up? What made you stay and persevere through to the end? So I'm seeing a qualification, higher purpose, you knew you could do it, self-belief, hopes, passion, resilience, lots of things. That's brilliant. And it's important to you. Thank you very much. I'm sure those are going to keep on coming in. So there are lots of things that would have driven you. And here is my belief. I am sure that in all of the situations that are in your heads right now, all of the things that you're thinking about, I'm sure there will be 3 things common to each and every scenario that you are now thinking about. And the first is this. When the going got tough, when it got difficult, you knew what you wanted to achieve. You were clear about that. I'm not saying you knew how you would do it, but you knew what you wanted to achieve. And how did you have that clarity? You thought about it. You thought, because you thought about it, that's what gave you the clarity. So I'm sure that would be true. The second thing that I'm sure of is that this meant something to you personally. There may have been other people involved, but this had real meaning for you personally. And the third thing that I'll be sure of is no matter how difficult it might have seemed, you never stopped believing that it was possible. So those 3 things, clarity of purpose, meaning to you yourself, personal meaning, and true belief, not just a hope, not just a wish, but true belief that it was possible. When those 3 things are in place, the internal motivation is far higher than anybody could provide externally. So do I try and motivate people? No. I believe it's short term and I believe it creates dependence. But whoever I'm working with, we will make sure that they are clear about what it is they are trying to achieve. They are clear about what it means to them. And they are clearly, truly and honestly believe that they can do it. So let's think back to your big goal. I wonder, what is it that you are actually, and exactly what are you trying to achieve through that goal? How clearly do you understand what you are trying to achieve? What does achieving that goal mean to you personally? Not to the team, not to the organization, not to the family. Those things are important, but they're not enough. How clear are you about what it means to you personally? And then do you really and honestly believe you can do it? And when all of those things line up, the level of motivation will be there. If any of those things are unclear, if someone is unclear about the purpose, if someone is unclear about the meaning, if someone really doesn't believe, then the motivation will fall. And when the going gets difficult, we will give up. That is just human nature. But the challenge is you can't tell people those things. The most that you can do, again, we come back to this thing about thought. All that we can do is help people, not all that we can, the most important thing we can do is to help people to think through those things for themselves. They have to process it. If they don't do that, it just doesn't work. Strong advice, suggestions coming from the outside may be nice, but they don't make the difference. And so I just want to say a little bit now about, I was asked about feedback recently, and especially in this time of remote working, feedback is something that I'm sure we're all used to. I'm sure we are all familiar with. But I often hear people talking about giving feedback, and I understand what they mean by that. But in a way, there's a challenge. And when we think about how the world is now, with so much remote working, so much stuff going on over the internet and things like that, there's a challenge. How do you give feedback on a performance that you probably didn't even see? Because that's now the new requirement. And if all that we can do is give feedback, if all that we can do is give our opinion, suggest what people can do, give them advice, then how do we survive? How do we move forward? How do we still be relevant in the new world? Because I don't see how that's possible. So this might be interesting to try. I'm normally in front of people so I can see what's going on. I cannot see you, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. So if you have close at hand a pen and a piece of paper, pencil and paper, you just need a pencil and paper, that's all. Because what I'm going to ask you to do is just to try and draw something very simple, very straightforward. You don't need anything else. Just if you have that, then let's try this. So yeah, let's do this the quick way. It doesn't have to be very big, but obviously not tiny. So if you've got a normal sheet of paper, maybe you want to have space to draw this. Let me think, we might do it 4 times. And all I'm going to ask you to do is draw a circle. That's it. Just draw a circle. So bear with, don't do it yet. Let me just explain what I want you to do. So in a moment, I'm just going to ask you to draw a circle, to draw the best circle that you can draw. Your future existence does not depend on how good a circle you do. So there is no pressure. I just want you to try and draw a circle. So if you have pen and paper handy and that's feasible, then go ahead, do that now and just draw a circle. Someone's telling me it's drawn. That is very good. Nice one. Okay. So I appreciate I just threw that at you, and that you did that very cold. You were just very cold doing that. Maybe your hand and your arm and your eyes needed warming up a little bit. So I'm going to invite you to draw another one. Just try and draw another circle as good as you can. And that's it for now. So draw a second circle. Okay. So take a look at your circles, and maybe you can choose whichever one you think is the better of the 2 circles. It doesn't really matter. here's what I'd like you to do. Check out or have a look at the circle, and if you were to draw a third one, I wonder what aspect of your original circles would you like to improve? So don't do any drawing yet. Just take a look at the circles and for yourself decide what aspect of the circle would you like to improve. So in other words, where is the imperfection in the circle? Whatever it might be. Okay. So when you're clear about where the imperfection is, what I'm going to ask you to do is this. So this is very important. I'd like you to draw a third circle, but I don't want you to try and correct the imperfection. What I need you to do is this. When you draw the circle, as you get to the point where the imperfection might be, I need you to notice what happens with you. It could be what's happening in your hand. It could be something with the, I don't know what it might be. But the important thing here is I need you to notice what happens when you get to that point. So don't try and correct it. Notice what happens when you get to that point. Okay, have a go and draw your third circle. And I'm sure I'm going to be seeing, there we go. I'm sure people are going to be telling me that they have drawn and it is done. Okay, so here's where it gets a little bit interesting. Obviously, you can't tell me this, but what I want you to think about is, what was it you noticed? That's what's important. Not how the circle came out. You can have a look at that later. But I wonder how able you were to notice what happened in that moment. So don't worry about the circle. I'm already seeing some people commenting on the circle. The circle is not the important thing. The important thing is what happened, what you noticed while you were drawing. That's the important thing. Okay. So now we're going to draw one more. And in this last drawing, again, I'm not wanting you to try and correct the circle. Whatever you noticed, my question to you would be this: what adjustment would you make based on what you noticed? So if you notice something in your hand, what adjustment would you make? If you notice something in your focus, what adjustment would you make? Or maybe you would heighten the focus or sustain the focus. So the key thing here is, what would you do based on what you noticed? And whatever you would do based on what you noticed, that's what I want you to do as you draw your last circle. So draw away, but the focus here is on what you would do based on what you noticed, not trying to correct the circle. Off you go and do your drawing. And again, I'm sure that some people will tell me what they noticed and what they did. So I'm seeing attentive, and they were trying to improve, and they've done, and they were more focused. They sustained the pressure on the page. Okay. Noticing the hand grip, relaxing the mind. And I wonder what you noticed, if anything, and obviously I don't know, I wonder what you noticed in the quality of your circle drawing. Or more to the point, if you now had to keep on going drawing circles, now that you've noticed what you've noticed, I wonder what that would do to the quality of the circles that you could draw. So some of you may find that it improved, and some of you may find that because you are now thinking about so many things, that the circles actually got a little bit worse. But the point is this: The point is, a lot was happening there without me telling you. If I was sitting in the room watching your first circle and giving you feedback, I might have been saying things like, pay more attention there, or that part of the circle is not quite as good, or do something with that part of the circle. The way I work with people, and for me, the whole point and the whole principle of performance coaching, what makes it so different is it is not driven from the perspective of the coach, it is driven from the perspective of the person that is doing the work. So I share with you a very brief, I'll try and give you a brief example of a story. An example through a story. I was working with Richard. We were away at a training camp in 2017 in South Africa, and we were there to train, we were doing some work, and on one day, the conditions were exactly the same as they were the year before. And I mean exactly, same temperature, same wind, everything. So I decided to repeat a session we had done the year before to see if we had some improvement, to see if he was fitter and faster. It's a very hard session, 3 runs. He competes over 200 meters. He had to this session was 3 runs over 220 meters. So longer than he competes, 3 of them on a long recovery. So it's really high intensity. The previous year, he ran this distance in 26.5 seconds. So we set up for this year. He does the first run, and it actually came out in 25.5 seconds, so 1 second faster. Now, I appreciate that may not sound like a lot, but in the world of sprinting, that is a massive difference. And as soon as I saw that time, I was worried that his system would now be too tired to complete the session. His neural system would be fatigued. But I didn't say anything. I just said, okay, this is the time. Now take the recovery and let's see what happens. But in between the first run and the second run, the wind changed direction, literally went from north to south. So I had to quickly go to the other side of the track and work out the correct distance because the marks on the track are different. But being very clever, I was able to do this. So he comes to the second run, he does the second run, and as I suspected, first one was 25.5, second one 27.1, not even close. So I said, yeah, I've got a feeling now that your system is just tired. That's what I'm thinking. But I asked him first what his thoughts were. And I was very surprised because he said to me, yes, that run, not quite as good. I didn't come off the bend as I should have done. So my speed in the straight was not perfect, but still good. That was 25.9. And I showed him the stopwatch and said, no, 27.1, much slower. And as I suspected, your system is tired because that first run was so fast. He just looked at me and said, no, I just ran 25.9. At which point I said, no, look at the stopwatch. It's showing 27.1. He knows I'm very accurate with a stopwatch. But he was insistent. He said, Coach, I am telling you, I just ran 25.9. So given that he is much larger than I am, I wasn't going to argue with him. And while he was resting for the second run, I thought, let me just go and check that I put the marks in the right place. And lo and behold, I was not quite as clever as I thought I was, and it was wrong. He hadn't run 220 meters. I had made him run 231 meters. And here's where it gets interesting. Because if you take 27.1 seconds and divide it by 231, and then multiply it by the distance he should have run, which was 220, it turns that 27.1 into 25.802, I think it is. So in other words, he was less than 1/10 of a second from being able to tell me how fast he had just run 1/8 of a mile. That is the level of awareness that I strive to achieve, not just with athletes, but with whoever I'm working with. So think about it. He was able to tell me how fast he ran before I even opened my mouth and told him what was on the stopwatch. So here's the point. Who was giving him the feedback? Obviously, it was coming from himself. So there's a difference between giving feedback and being able to help people to self-generate feedback. If we work with people in the right way, and going forward, I believe this is critical. And what I was just trying to illustrate with you with the drawing of the circles. If we challenge people to think about what goes into the performance, not only worrying about giving feedback on the outcome of the performance, then we help the performer to operate at a much higher level because they are generating feedback internally. They are generating feedback themselves, which when you combine that with external feedback, really takes it to another level. And so, I hope that makes some sense. And one last little thing, which I'm going to try and show you. And again, I'm going to need to try and share my screen. So I hope I can do this properly. And I will rely on, maybe Rowena can tell me, or Govinda can tell me when or if, when I do this properly, you can see the screen. So why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because, sorry, this comes from the Paralympics in Sydney in 2000. And I remember being astonished when I watched this. And for the reason that it says great performance can only come when two things happen. One is when the performer is in charge of the performance, not relying on external. Because from what I'm about to show you, the external coach, no matter how good they were, could not tell this person how to do this. The person has to own the performance and be able to do it for themselves. And the other thing is you have to be able to imagine the performance. You have to be able to picture the performance. If you can't, well, something that I really believe in, you cannot produce a performance that you cannot imagine. So a question I always ask people, and in closing, I will ask you this as well. The question to you is this: how good could you be? And I don't mean in terms of your necessarily your job title or role or function. I mean you, the person, the individual. How good could you be? And if we don't spend time to think about that, we will never be the best version of ourselves. So while I try and set up this share screen, this is a high jump. And the record for this high jump is just below 2 meters. So in most houses, the door frames are set at 2 meters. So this person would have the ability to jump over the door in your house. Now, why am I showing you this? Because I think if this person came up to you and asked you the question, how high do you think I can jump? I'm not sure many of you would say, I think you could jump over the door in my house. Perfect. Okay. All right. So this is just on the 2 meters. The beauty with performance is we can set the performance bar at any height that we like, and we can clear it. and we can help people to clear their performance bars. The challenge is, and especially as we go forward, we might just need to think about doing some things a little bit differently, interacting with people differently, and doing a little bit less based on what's in our heads and helping them to use more what's in their heads. It challenges them to work harder, but it changes the game. I hope that has made some sense. I hope that's given you some things to think about. Taken a little bit longer than I intended to, but I hope I've left enough time for some questions.
Thank you so much, Keith. We are all overwhelmed and profound talk. While we will start off with the questions, before that, I would just like the audience to place one emotion that they are feeling in one word, so we get to know how you feel at this time. In just one word, if you can type whatever you want. Moved, excited, wow. So we are looking for questions now, and you can post the questions in your chat. So we have a question. What is the barrier? How can we self-motivate ourselves during difficult times? That's something has come out. Self-motivation and staying motivated.
Yeah. So self-motivating, and I just saw there someone asking about motivating students. And I think, as I said before, I think the things are, well, it's pretty much the same thing. I'm just looking at it from a different perspective. So if we take the self-motivation, sometimes that can seem really difficult, especially if we have not initially accepted the current situation that we are in.
It's just going up so fast.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of them.
Oh yeah. So, sorry.
That's okay. So for me, the challenge of staying self-motivated in difficult time is, first of all, you have to accept where you are. A lot of people I'm talking to at the moment are struggling with the current situation with COVID, because they still want things to be as they were before. And so it's always going to be difficult, because your brain is also going to be telling you that things are different. So it's really hard to reposition and do so. If I think about, as I said beforehand, right now, we should be in the middle of our competitive season, getting ready to go to Tokyo. Well, we're not. We are stuck at home, still on the lockdown, and can't really train to the full extent. Well, that is the current situation. So now what we have to do is say, given that this is the new situation, then now what do I want to achieve? So what I've said I've had this conversation with my athletes. I'll tell you from my perspective and with the athletes, and that might help with both self-motivation and understanding with your students. So I've said to him, we are in lockdown. The games have gone to next year. What is the new goal? And the new goal we've set is to make sure that we are fit and healthy for when winter training starts in September. That's it. So now we have the new goal. We've worked out what are the things that we need to do based on that. So we're clear about our purpose. We understand what that means to us, because if we achieve that, it increases the likelihood that we get through the winter with no injuries and no illnesses. Do we believe this is possible? Absolutely, 100%, because we've done it before. So when things are difficult, sometimes we need to accept the new situation and then go back to those three things: clear about the purpose, really clear about the meaning to us ourselves, and then really, really and truly believing that it's possible. And if we can do that for ourselves with our students, we have to challenge them to think it through and not be trying to tell them or suggest or advise them what they should be doing, because that won't work.
Thank you so much, Keith. We have another question with respect to women. How do you think women have lots of challenges to motivate herself than men? I know it's a women's world, but if you can give us a perspective, really.
Well, okay. Not being a woman, but I have looked at this question quite a lot. I think that one of the things that is a big difference is It's a combination of motivation and confidence, self-confidence. It's hard to be motivated if your self-confidence is low. And so the question that I often ask a lot of women is this: where does your confidence come from? And it's not that one is right or one is wrong, but confidence normally, if you look at a spectrum, it can either be, with all of us, our confidence can dominantly be internal or it can be external. If it's internally, it means we derive our confidence from ourselves and the things we do and our thoughts and our beliefs. If it's external, it means we derive confidence from feedback and things that other people tell us, comments and criticism, whatever, from other people. One of them isn't right or wrong, one isn't better or worse, but it's critical that you understand what your preference is. Because if you don't understand your preference, then you can't feed it. So if you are more internally driven, then you need to do things that feed that confidence. If you're more externally driven, you need to set things up to make sure you're getting what you need. And so when the confidence rises, with that goes the levels of motivation. And then it's much easier to be clear about what you want, much easier to be clear about what things mean to you, and much easier to really have belief that you can do what you want to do.
Thank you again, Keith. We have one more question, and it's a very sensitive question and very thoughtful question. Is how do we motivate the field force in this change scenario of uncertainty, since there are people working out there?
How to motivate the sales force?
Yes, the field force, the field force. Yeah, currently the people who are working now in the field, that's what I'm understanding.
I think, again, for me, this comes back to having true performance goals. Most people in the field, whether it's sales or whatever, they will have targets, they will have goals. There'll be numbers they need to achieve. When the world changes as much as it has changed, they know that achieving those things is almost impossible. So if achieving their objective looks impossible, then obviously motivation is really going to drop. So I'm not saying you take away that goal, but what I am saying is that goal has to be supported by some performance goals. What are things that they can do that are absolutely within their control? Maybe it's about the amount of times they interact with people. Maybe it's about them checking the quality of conversation they have with people. Maybe checking how they build rapport, but something that is in their control, that if they do it well enough, it will deliver the bigger goal. But if all they have is the bigger goal, with the way that the world has changed and the changes that they're having to go through, that is massively demotivating for people.
Thank you, Keith. In the interest of time, we'll just take one last question.
Okay.
And we thank all the participants who have asked the questions. Can you suggest some methods to increase awareness while doing routine work?
Absolutely. Because in a way, you know, there's nothing that's much more routine than sport, running. You know, you're putting one leg in front of the other as fast as you can. That's fairly routine. I guess my easiest way to try and answer this would be to set everyone a little challenge. So think about a task or a request that you made of someone recently. It doesn't have to be big, but anything that you've asked someone to do, work, home, doesn't matter. Okay, now what I need you to think of is this. In order for them to do that task really well, what do they need to be aware of? What do they need to focus on? What do they need to be thinking about while they're doing the task? Okay. And then when you've got that, the next part is, so if that's what they need to be thinking about, what question could you ask them so that in order to answer that question, they have to focus on the thing that makes the difference? You see what I mean? So you're asking a question which is not about you getting an answer in that moment. You're asking a question which you want to be in their heads when they're doing whatever the thing is they need to do. Very similar to when I asked you, draw the circle, but then pay attention to what happens when you get to the imperfect part. Then as you got there, because my question was still in your head, your awareness of what was happening in that moment was really heightened. All because I asked you a really simple question. And it's our ability to ask more questions that will really help people to raise their awareness. The link between asking questions to provoke thought, which will raise awareness, is what enables people to be able to do those things. So it's in a way a simple thing to understand what to do, but it's really difficult to do it in practice. It takes a lot of practice to be able to do it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Keith. And yes, we had an overwhelmingly awareness of ourselves, and overwhelming time of awareness and motivation, and so many thoughts rushing through our head. You've got all the people thinking. We once again, from from our hearts, we want to thank you, Keith, for this wonderful time. I want to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Korean Daniel for collaborating with us at the Western region and the national office, and each and every one who is participating here. Like we had promised, that all those who will stay till the end will have a surprise. Mr. Ajay Phillips has just put in a link here for a drive. On the drive. Before that, I also want to inform you that Dominion Phillips Consultancy conducts online webinars, and we also have some programs for development. So we are sharing the details on the drive. At the same time, we are privileged to have Keith with us as an associate partner and to work with us on various projects in India. So coaching through him and training through him and his programs are also mentioned on the drive.